Today's podcast features two very special guests, Dr. Steve Dorcely and Dr. Shwana Hansford, two of our amazing graduates from our Russell Sage doctoral program. On this episode, they will be discussing their latest business endeavor, Strategies Matters, a blog set out to inform and support various projects throughout education with a unique team of bloggers that are seasoned educators and administrators. I did want to start off by saying or asking, how has life been since becoming doctors?
Life is life. It keeps going. When you accomplish something, I think what comes immediately after that feeling of relief of having gone over, that mountain, is that there's something else, that you're going to have to tackle. And it's just a perpetual forward moving, idea. There's always more to do in this world. And life continues. No matter what we are going through, no matter what we undertake, life continues and it keeps happening. And there's something more coming ahead. So for me, that's what it's been. What about you, Dr. Steve Dorcely?
Thank you for that. I think answering that question, I think of it in at least two ways. On a personal level, it's a wonderful accomplishment. I think the acknowledgement from the family, the loved ones, the friends, that I've reached an important milestone is very, very, it's a wonderful accomplishment, because that having a doctorate is the top of the degrees in every different industry or field. So it's good to be that sense of accomplishment as an educator. Professionally at work, it has really, I'm the expert now. So at work, especially in a time where the Department of Education is rolling out culture responsive framework, and it's something that my research was on. I think they look to me for all right, so what does the CRS really say? How can we deconstruct it? How can we conceptualize it? And what does it mean for our community? So I think I've become the expert. And even my principal would say, hey, Dr. Dorcely, what are your thoughts on the following policy issue? So professionally, the acknowledgement, it validates the work, the important work, that you have someone in your staff who's a researcher, who's going to dig in, looking into policies, looking at how we can best address the issue as it relates to our individual community. So it's been a great accomplishment on that end as well.
For me, this has been a moment that's a long time coming. I think I shared with Steve earlier that in reflecting upon this question, that Dr. Beth Shaw, she was the first woman who I knew who had a doctorate. And, or rather, she was working towards her doctorate, because when I first met her, she was Miss Shaw. And she was the first person, I think, who brought it to me at the very young age, I might have been 14, 15, that it was possible, for a woman to aspire to do this, and to not just do it for herself, but to be able to help another community of people. When we think of marginalized students who are marginalized students, I'm that marginalized student. I would have fit into that category at one point. And she was definitely an inspiration for me. And as the world shut down during COVID, I realized that I had begun this journey with SAGE, but it was something that I had not completed. And so I was re-entered into cohort 7, which is where I met Steve and Dr. Dorcely and my wonderful POP team, who Andrew, Dr. Carlin, and Dr. Madeline, so on and so forth. And they've all really, during this process, because the journey, it's a process and it continues to unfold, they have been a source of great inspiration and strength, and just a fountain of pedagogical knowledge, to draw upon and to sustain one. So when we talk about social emotional learning, what does that mean for students? Definitely being a part of the SAGE cohort model, there's a wealth of strength to draw upon there for educators, for educational leaders as well. Dr. Steve?
Thank you. I just thinking about that, earning a doctorate, to me, is just one step of the process, right? And joining a team of experts the doctorate validates that you have the training and the knowledge to be able to really look at an issue that is important to you, but in a deeper lens. So I wanted to be that expert around education. I wanted to be that go-to when it comes to a topic that is very dear to me. Like, I'm very passionate about how our students who are considered marginalized are being represented. You hear researchers who say that, African Americans, it requires you to tap into their cultural identity for them to really excel. And then all the disinformation around how we learn and we can't achieve, and then the academic gap. So I wanted to look into those issues pretty deeply. So I think earning a doctorate provides me with that training and that deep quantitative lens to be able to look at research, not just the research that I like, the research that I also don't agree with, and to see how they are conceptualizing these ideas around people who look like me as learners. So to me, that doctorate meaning I am part of that group of experts who can really delve into an issue and provide both sides as well, right? Why are students of color not succeeding in a particular school, and look at some of the other factors, not just the socioeconomic factors, but about is the academic setting allowing them to excel? So I think that I wanted to pursue that, like at my school, as the first of to be an African-American educator in that building who's an administrator. Don't only use me when there's issues involving students of color, but utilize me for the expertise that I'm going to dig in and go deep into a policy issue, a research issue, to look at it and see what the impact, maybe not just on the academic level, but what are the unexpected impact around student learning. And I want to be part of that. And I think that's why a doctorate degree validates that, and why I wanted to pursue to be part of that expert, to dig in, and that issue never stops. Like, it's learner. Doctorate means you're a lifelong learner. Like, you're going to look at an issue and go deep, and deep entails, again, the research, right? Looking at what other scholars are saying about this particular topic. What contributions can you provide in that topic? So that's why my area of culturally responsive education was something that was dear to me, because I was part of a Title I school all my career, my educational career and life in the DOE. So I wanted to see, right, from the lens of a student to an educator to administrator to a principal, how does that really impact me and my learning, and who are the adults, right, tasked to support me, and how can we help them understand that how I learn, so then we sort of have a balanced educational system. So I think in our joint research lens, meaning involving myself, Dr. Colin, Dr. Madeline, and Shwana, when we looked at our joint study of looking at how is culture responsiveness impacting marginalized students in the COVID-19. So we wanted to look specifically at what is culture responsive. There's multiple different lenses of what that looks like. And I just want to cite Lanton Billings, for example, describes culture responsive pedagogy as a way of improving student learning capacity of diverse students. So it's one of the focus, and then it centers around the cognitive aspects of teaching and learning, right? What is the cognitive that's required to get students to excel, and how do we tap into that? So she had looked at some key factors involving the academic achievement of students, the social political consciousness, as well as cultural competence. And in her research, she looked at knowledge construction. So what are we doing as educators to allow students the opportunity to construct knowledge? And for me, cultural responsiveness is really being always having the understanding of how individual cultures can impact learning. And we need to be very conscious and intentional in what we do to tap into that resource, right? Because we all bring in something unique in terms of how we learn. So I think being culturally responsive to that is very, very important. Our research also looked at some of the key factors impacting student learning. Like, we looked at what are the adults doing, right? What can they change and shift in their practice to sort of like adjust their methodologies and and understanding of how students learn and what do they need to do to make that adjustment. So it's a whole piece, but also includes the adult playing a role to support students in their development and learning. I'll tap it now to Dr. Hansford.
Thank you, Dr. Steve. So as you well know, Andrew, with SAGE, we each have an individual research dissertation topic, and then we have a team research. So what you referenced was specifically our team research. My individual research, the title of which is Elementary and Middle School Leaders' Beliefs about the Viability of the PBIS Framework During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So through a qualitative lens, I looked at my specific populations and what is it that they experienced during that time? What does it tell us? What does it inform us about PBIS? And what can we draw from that to look at how we can continue to make learning accessible and equitable for students, during this time? Where does the CRS framework fit in with that? Well, there are 4 principles of CRS, right? How do we create a welcoming environment for students? What are the high expectations and rigorous instructional learnings that we can glean from what we're doing in the classroom? How do we create an inclusive curriculum and inclusive assessments that all students have equity in and a say in and access to? And what is the ongoing professional learning that we can bring forth within our school communities, within our wider district communities? So for us, I think that's what we think of when we look at culturally responsive. Those 4 principles, what does it mean for students? How do we impact them? And how do we as educators always look for that balance between student voice, parent voice, what's going on in the community? Because it's about the students. How do we help them to feel a part of the community? How do we get them to look at their own culture as having value so that they continue to see themselves as part of the process? They're not just a piece, they are part of the process. I think that's very important, from a very basic pre-K level. It's very important that we move through the different grade bands with that. So CRS is definitely, I think, something that we can say that's here to stay. I look forward to continuing to build upon this body of research with my own individual work with PBIS, as well as what my other colleagues have brought forth in their own dissertations.
And if I could just add to that, thank you, Dr. Hansford, just to go deeper into our collective research, even though we had individual research, but that Dr. Hansford said, but collectively, we looked at 3 key questions. One is, how do educational leaders align their pedagogical beliefs of culture responsive practices to create a welcoming environment? So when we looked at that overarching piece, each of us had a contribution. So out of our 53 participants, we recognized that fostering a relationship with families and utilizing remote tools and resources can help increase stakeholder communication and accountability. We also looked at a second question is, how are the perceptions of educational leaders reinforcing culture responsive support for staff, students, and families in response to the COVID-19 pandemic? With that also, we also were able to find that professional development for specific groups are essential, including looking at Black males with IEPs, ACEs, and LGBTQ youth, and how do we help strengthen their culture responsive instruction by leading to academic achievement. So we're able to look at that. And then the last question we looked at combined was, what are the processes that educational leaders apply to monitor and assess culture responsive instruction for marginalized students? And when we looked at that specific questions, we started to know some distinctions here. For example, in one of my colleagues' research, 16 out of the 53 participants applied progress monitoring and assessment of culture responsive practices, whereas another 16 out of 53 participants provided ongoing professional development, whereas the most we found in our collective research was 25 out of 53 participants. They looked at formal and informal modeling of learning processes in order to foster expectations. So we had some key findings in looking at how our participants that we investigated utilized not only the CRS, but applying the culture responsive practices to support their improvement of student learning. So that's a great question around Strategies Matter. As you can see the background. So it was more or less the ability for us to just to share our learning as educators and researchers, and what we have learned over the course of our experience, as well as 27 months at the SAGE program. So taking the research process, taking understanding quantitative and qualitative, the rigorous part of the writing, the reflection, all these play a role when we're reflecting on strategy that we know that works. So the idea came, and it could have been no other person that I would want to tap to be my partner than Dr. Hansford, because we just had that connection. Keep in mind that we've never met personally. I don't know what Dr. Schwana looks like, other than if you even say that's not even Dr. Schwana, I wouldn't even know.
Virtual learners.
Correct. That's absolutely true. So again, the idea was just how do we become this this one shop where we are providing proving strategies, not only based off our research, but also a collection of even other research we're coming across around what educators can do and do well to support their students, particularly focusing on marginalized students. And I think that with the new chancellor now, Chancellor Banks, who are now, I know that educators are always looking for ways to strengthen practice. We want to be where that tool, where even the Department of Education, the largest system in the world, are tapping to our blog to understand the importance of specific, targeted practices and strategies to support the adults so they can, effectively help the students perform and excel. Dr. Hansford?
Thank you. I 100% agree with him. And it was Dr. Steve who brought this opportunity to me. So coming out of dissertation mode, defense mode, we had accomplished that. We're looking towards getting our diplomas. So the next step, you're thinking, well, what else can I do to impact the field? What else can I do to be a part of this unfolding process? And yes, during this time of isolation, people need to have strategies that they can go to. We need to be able to widen and enlarge in our educational toolkit. So I think definitely the name of the blog is very telling. We want to utilize core and solid strategies that teachers can use, that principals can use, that systems leaders can use, and even parents, or students. This is not just a blog only for educators. We want it to be a place where students can come and learn something that they can take back to their individual classrooms, that parents can come and learn something that they can take back into their homes or their schools. So definitely Strategies Matters is important. We would like for it to be something that can be a resource to New York State and, perhaps at some point to the country, for educators and parents and different stakeholders to turn to.
And just to add to that, I think one of the things that we're very proud of, and I think I can say that very confidently, we are doing the research and looking at others. So we're citing important research around this topic. And our strategies is grounded on research. It's not just things that we think work for us, but it is grounded on research that are noting that the importance of having educators lead this work. And we are very happy to be part of that process where we're looking at what the other research is saying. So we're not peer reviewing, but what we are doing is we're extracting how in the little bite-sized pieces, telling educators, hey, we know this work in terms of helping students. Here it is, we're summarizing it for you, and why don't you try it? And then even asking them to give us some feedback as well about how the strategy is helping their communities move along to supporting children.
I think I would be open to doing both, to having a virtual platform as well as an in-person platform. For me, one of the key learnings that has come out of this pandemic is that remote learning has its place in education, and that in terms of technology moving forward, it's here to stay. So we've had years of doing in-person learning. We know what that looks like. We know what the research says behind it. We're still learning about virtual. We're still learning how to do remote and to do it well, and to do it with integrity. and to do it with fidelity. So it's not something that we can just throw out and say, no, it doesn't work, especially having done it under the duress of COVID-19. There's so much more to explore here. There's further research that needs to be done. So definitely, I would be open to providing support in person as well as virtually, because I think there's a lot to explore there and to learn from. What do you think, Dr. Steve?
I totally agree. I think when you ask the question, why did we want to become doctors? I think the answer is very fitting. We recognize the importance of the professional adult learning. I think part of the adult learning is to be able to do workshops, right? Whether it's virtual and in person, but we have been able to understand the learning virtually it's also hard, right? When we transition to full remote, just as students, and balancing that with professional work, with collaboration. So we want to take some of that learning as well, and then be able to support school systems who want to transition to that platform, or doing it in a way that, it's benefiting all stakeholders, parents, students, staff, and educators. So I think having that experience and be able to want to continue this work, whether it is in person or virtual, is something that comes with being a doctor, comes with that important responsibility as doctoral, not students, but as graduates, right, of the SAGE program, like 27 months of intense work, and taking that intense work and to set up in a way where we can support other educators, whether it's through an in-person or workshop, is something that comes with becoming a doctor, I think.
That's a great question. And I think in what we have considered, that there has to be a balance, between the two. So what are the practical realities of what people are facing in the school system, in the community? But also we want to match that or balance it out with what research is saying, whether it's qualitative, whether it's quantitative, where's that coming from? So I definitely think that it's a balance and a marriage between the two. So it's definitely an organic unfolding process, but we want to look at the contributions of people as they're being celebrated on a monthly or thematic unit. But it's important to realize that we don't only celebrate people during that specific month, that because it's designated as Black History Month or Women's Month, we celebrate them every day, in different ways that we can. But we bring it, I think, specifically to consciousness at that point, because it's something that we're all doing together, in the month of February or in the month of March, if you will.
I like that, Dr. Hansford. I mean, a key takeaway for me, I love the organic, the practical realities, be able to match the month themes. I think we had all that in mind. So we specifically have, and there's a lot of stuff that we have in terms of ideas we would love to write about. But I think for us, definitely has to be something that's purposeful, right? And timely. Like remote learning is something that's very timely. There's still a lot of research to be done of its impact. And just adding the Black history is American history is something that we don't want to just designate 1 month to celebrate the beautiful cause of the African-American experience, right? So we want that to be an organic piece, like celebrating not only Women's Month next month, but something that is also organic. So our writing, and we're also encouraging other STAGE graduates to join our force as writers as well, because we have a lot to offer. We believe that, especially Pop Team 4B. So this is me giving them a shout out, because
Dr.
together,
Carlin and Dr. Madeline.
Dr. Madeline, Dr. Carlin, as a team, we believe that, we have something special. And I think the special is the collaboration, the teamwork. We trust each other. We rely on each other. And I don't think after STAGE, the ending of STAGE, we felt like this stops. We're continually, Shawan and I are continually meeting to discuss, the specific issues, even to the point where we're considering even a podcast. So there's a lot to be done around this work. So, but thank you so much, Shawan. I think I love the fact that you said the practical realities piece, because I'm still in the DOE. So there's issues all the time with the DOE, whether it's policy issues or ideas. And I think that I can take some of that and say, all right, this is some of the challenges or the problem of practice using SAGE training. This is what the DOE is currently struggling with. Let's sit down, let's map it out and how we can pull research. And that's what we want this Strategies Matter to be able to do, to support them in that area as well.
Well, I definitely would like to see it be a key resource for other educators, for system leaders. I think it's also important to have a global lens. So for perhaps that other educators outside of the country internationally can look at to say what's going on in education in the US, as we should also be looking at what's going on in education, you know, out there internationally. I think that's one of the things that COVID has helped us with in this time of isolation, to be able to look at each other and see into one another's worlds. I think that's very, very important as we continue to build that idea of welcoming and affirming environments, not just here in the US, but also abroad. So definitely, I would like to see that be a key research tool and resource. And yeah, I think that's the most important thing for me.
Yeah, similar. I like to think of the educational system as having multiple pillars, right? Where there's parents, there's students, there's educators, administrators, teachers, and be able to be that tool that provides those pillars with support and strategies. So when it talks about strategies, parents should also have strategies of how students learn or their children learn. I give you something that I do at home that's very, very simple for me. I start my day with my children by asking them, give me a high of the day, give me something that was low, and give me something that was unexpected. That's a strategy because of my busy time at work, to come home and quickly get to summary. Okay, kids, what's happening with you? So that's a strategy that I share with my parents during meetings. I'm like, oh, really? I say, yes, I know everyone is busy, but you always want to engage your children at home, but something as simple as this. So Strategies Matter should be that place or that hub where parents, educators, system leaders, from superintendents to deputy superintendents, even the chancellor, can pull a strategy that they can utilize to affect change around the system. So that's something that I envision. And then in 5 years or 6 years, we should be the go-to blog, where we are growing with multiple writers from Sage and other universities, where people, yeah, correct, that people can come in and say, hey, I'm thinking about trying this strategy around culture responsiveness, or even something that supports whether it's Black males, Hispanic males, or females, that they can quickly grab and apply and then give us feedback. I think the feedback loop is also important when we have a blog, because you want them to say, hey, I tried this, it did work or did not work. So that's where I envision us growing like a big hub where all the education system is saying, hey, did you check out Strategies Matters? And that's what we want, including a partnership with Sage. I think it's important that we have a partnership with the institution that provide us with the training so we can do this work and become doctors.
Absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
If I can chime in, I think that was one of the reasons why we brought it to your attention, you know, that we were moving forward on this new venture. And we have other things coming. You know, we have an idea for a book in the work amongst the four of us. And we'd like to write an article specifically about collaboration in the SAGE cohort model and the strengths and how it supported us moving forward through the dissertation process. So a lot to do here. There's a lot of important work. There's a lot of there are strategies to share and to learn from.
I would start with the power of believing, right? I think the power of believing is so important. After Sage, or let me just start with during Sage, I remember, you know, we went to Albany and we met the previous cohort. I think just hearing from the perspective of at that time, I think it was going to be the graduating class. And one of the things I remember, one of the candidates indicated is that you want to be consistent. You don't want to fall behind in your work. You want to be consistent. And he said, you know, get these reflections out, get these papers out, and your confidence start building. So that power of believing, and you start believing in yourself that you can do this work. And an advice would be, the professors are very, very accessible. I think it's in that cohort model for me, made it so important. Having an advisor, having a Dr. Alamo that I can talk to when I am stressed beyond, like, oh my God, at work, like when we transitioned to COVID, I was like, what? This is new for all of us. And then the learning that was required but sage understanding that we are also educators and we have a 9-to-5 job. Sometimes it's like not even a 9-to-5, but they give us that time to get this work done and supporting us. So for young people who are considering a doctorate degree, I say take it very, very seriously. Know what you are at least considering. What is the problem practice? Like, what do you want to solve around education? No, not so much what do you want to do when you grow up, but what you want to solve. I want to solve the ethnic, the segregation. I want to solve the race and the achievement gap. I want to really solve that. So I'm very passionate about that, particularly around marginalized students. So I had that interest, and I think SAGE allowed me to see how research, right, understanding the methodologies can support me, so then I can have an audience to understand and accept this work of what we can do together to support students. Dr. Hansford.
Thank you, Dr. Steve there. That was a great question, especially for people who may feel like I'm not sure if I have what it takes, or if I'm not sure if I'm enough. Whether you're a student or an adult, I think that I know I have been there, and I believe we all have been there. One of my favorite quotes is by James Baldwin, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. So not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I believe that research is about facing what is in front of us, and then doing the research, doing the work, doing the analysis, and looking at how can we make some sort of recommendation to affect change. So Dr. White, thank you for everything that you taught me, for being a support, and for really believing when in those moments when I felt I couldn't, that I could. Because definitely what Steve has said is the professors are beyond excellent at SAGE. They sustain us, they strengthen us, they challenge us, they push us, and they let us know that they're there to support us, and that we can, that we matter, that we have something to offer as systems leaders. They have pushed just the idea of creating partnerships within our teams. And for us, that as part of POP Team 4B, it's something that has really transcended the dissertation journey. We're a family, we are a family, and we work together as family, we collaborate, we lean on one another, we look to one another for feedback and ideas. We've learned how to build trust and communicate, and to remember that all of our voices matter. Those are definitely key tenets that I think that many of us come to SAGE with, but that SAGE helps us to continue to build upon as we're thinking about what will happen when we leave, as we're thinking about how we can use our dissertation pieces, as we're thinking about how can we make the world better for the students that we serve.
I want to extend a very special thank you to our guests for joining us today. We really, really, really appreciate all the insight that you've given us. And for more information on our podcast, be sure to follow our social media platforms on Instagram at CITE Online, Facebook CITE Online, and Twitter CITE Online. That's CITE ONLINE. And you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. Till next time.